Welcome back to the show today. We are talking about NBA trade requests, or a better name would be trade demands, right? Because more than likely, a player isn't asking politely to be traded to a different team. Usually there's a threat of insubordination with a trade request. Ultimately, the player is contracted to play on the team that he's on. He can't strike, he can't not work. He's legally obligated to get his ass on the court. Dribble a little bit, get a hand up, take a shot or two, but he can try not to play. Such was the case with Ben Simmons in 2021. In the playoffs of 2021, Ben Simmons passed up an open dunk. Y'all remember. In the Eastern Conference semifinals, it was a game 7. It was a pretty big game. He passed up the dunk because he didn't want to get hacked by Trae Young and go to the free throw line and miss free throws. The Sixers lost that game, and obviously Ben Simmons became the scapegoat. His teammates and his coach didn't exactly take some of the blame off Ben and put it on themselves.
Ben Simmons can still be a point guard for a championship team like the one you guys want to become?
Yeah, David, I don't know that question or the answer to that right now.
So understandably, Ben Simmons was hurt by these comments. His teammates didn't have his back and his coaches didn't have his back. He wanted out of there. He requested the trade, but then the Sixers never traded him. I don't think anyone wanted him after that performance. So basically, Ben just held out. He didn't play. He didn't even show up at the practice facility. I think he went to one practice and had his phone in his pocket or something. But for the intents and purposes of this video, he was not a part of that team. Simmons' camp cited that he was mentally unwell and that he was having back problems. That was the reason why he wasn't showing up to the facility. But the Sixers had a legitimate reason to fine him because he wasn't even showing up to the facility, so they did. But then Simmons filed a $2 million grievance against the Sixers. It equaled the amount that he was being fined by the Sixers. Ultimately, Ben Simmons was finally traded to the Brooklyn Nets. The Sixers settled their case out of court. The amount of money was never disclosed. Usually what this means is both parties were pretty disappointed with what they got, and usually this is what happens. Typically it's only the lawyers that win, right? And that's why most trade requests usually get honored pretty quickly. No one wants to go to court, no pun intended. Pun suck. That's why Jimmy Butler went out on the court and kept it casual. You even have James Harden putting on a fat suit and taking the court just so the Rockets would trade him. This is the leverage that a player has when he demands a trade. A player has to literally make himself available. That's all he's got to do. But what about the case where the player nor the team want the player to play? The specific incident I'm referring to is the Anthony Davis trade demand when he wanted to go to the Lakers from the Pelicans in 2019. Right before the trade deadline in 2019, Anthony Davis's agent and LeBron James's agent, Rich Paul, said that Anthony wanted to be traded preferably to the Lakers. Again, it was right before the trade deadline, so they were trying to move things quick. Unfortunately, the Pelicans didn't like anything that the Lakers offered them. They thought they could get a better deal for AD in the offseason. So the trade deadline passed, and then it was really awkward between Anthony Davis and the New Orleans Pelicans, right? Davis obviously wasn't interested in playing as a Pelican anymore, and the Pelicans didn't want AD to play for 2 different reasons. At that point, they were trying to tank. The season was over, and they didn't need Anthony Davis's help tanking. Also, they didn't want AD to get injured and then reduce his stock price in the offseason. So really, the only party that wanted Anthony Davis to be playing was the NBA, and maybe the fans themselves, but they just wanted to boo him. People didn't want to watch a Drew Holiday-led Pelicans team. I didn't want to, and I'm a Drew Holiday fan. The league informed the Pelicans that, hey, healthy players must play. So the Pelicans did play AD, and AD did play, but they played him as little as possible, and when they could, they managed his load. Gave him a couple days off here and there. Basically, they just wanted to keep him on ice for whoever was going to trade for him. Ultimately, it was the Lakers that traded for Anthony Davis. It all worked out anyway. But let's say the Heat hadn't traded Jimmy Butler this year and the trade deadline had expired, and Jimmy was still a member of the Heat. I don't think Jimmy would have played as nice as 2019 Anthony Davis. So when we're talking about trade demands in the NBA, we're talking about leverage. The player can only demand a trade if he has leverage. He needs to know the situation that the organization is in. I think the master of the trade demand is James Harden, right? A lot of people think James Harden is reckless or a malcontent. I don't think this is true at all. I think Harden is just the master of getting where he wants to go. Let's take 2 years ago when he demanded a trade from the Sixers. I want to make this real simple. Basically, James Harden took less money 1 year so that he could take more money in the future. He was promised more money. This less money and then more money in the future situation was promised to James Harden by Daryl Morey, the vice president of basketball for the Sixers. But then, of course, you remember,
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of.
he didn't get his money. So then Harden was in a situation where he had a player option with the Sixers, meaning he could play for the Sixers, he could opt into that money, or he could drop the contract and he could go sign for another team. Well, obviously Harden feels betrayed by Daryl Morey, so he's going to opt out of that last year and he's going to go sign with another team, right? No, he actually opts into the contract. Why would he do that? It's because Harden didn't get any offers in free agency. No team that he wanted to play for was going to offer him enough money. They didn't have enough cap space. He didn't want to go play for a bad team, and he he also didn't want to sign with a good team for a little bit of money. So he said, hey, I'm just going to opt into my last year of this contract and then force the Sixers to trade me. I still have my fat suit in my closet. And it worked. The Sixers traded him to the Clippers. I told you he's good. Now I have to talk about the Kevin Durant trade demand. Because when KD demanded a trade away from the Brooklyn Nets, owner of the Nets, Joe Tsai, and Sean Marks, the general manager, said, no, you're going to stay here. You're going to play basketball. And it worked. He did. But I got to go back even a little bit further, because not only did KD demand a trade, Kyrie wanted out too. The Nets weren't willing to give Kyrie a long-term extension, just given that he was pretty unavailable for his entire tenure with the Nets. Y'all remember what he did and didn't do. So in the summer of 2022, KD and Kyrie both had their trade demands rejected. Then Durant goes out and says, hey, I'll stay if you fire Steve Nash, the head coach, and the general manager, Sean Marks. Personally, I think that's a bigger swing than demanding a trade, isn't it? And of course, Joe Tsai, the owner, said, no, I'm not going to do that. He called his bluff. Kevin Durant played. He played basketball. He almost played every game up until the deadline. Same thing with Kyrie. Kyrie played 40 games until the deadline. Then at the deadline, both players were traded. Kyrie was traded to the Mavericks and Kevin Durant was traded to the Suns. And here's why I think it worked for Joe Tsai. He was prepared to let both guys sit out if they wanted to. He was going to wait until he got the deal that he wanted. If KD and Kyrie would have decided to sit out, Joe Tsai wouldn't have taken them to court. He wouldn't have even fined them. Because the thing is, KD and Kyrie, they enjoy playing basketball. They want to be out there. They like being in the NBA. That was the leverage that Joe Tsai had. He knew he could use their love of playing basketball against them. And contractually, the only team that they could play for if they wanted to play basketball was the Brooklyn Nets. Joe Tsai's patience got him huge hauls for both Kevin Durant and Kyrie. So one observation I've made over the years is there's no way to demand a trade and then also be remembered fondly by an organization or its fans. I think the only exception that kind of proves the rule is Vince Carter and the Toronto Raptors. He never demanded a trade, but in essence, he kind of just gave up the team in 2004, which forced the Raptors to trade him to the Nets in December. Raptors fans hated Vince Carter for like 2 decades, man, until ownership just decided to retire his jersey, and then Raptors fans loved him again. I think the reason they just forgave him was because it had been 20 years. It was water under the bridge. You can't be mad forever, and Vince Carter was a superstar. There were some good times there in Toronto. I think the same thing's gonna go for Dame in Portland. A lot of Trailblazers were really butthurt when Dame demanded a trade in 2023, but the Trailblazers are gonna retire his jersey. I'm sure of it. He's a very important part of that franchise and its history. But situations like James Harden in the Sixers, Kevin Durant in the Nets, even Jimmy Butler in the Heat, he also took the Heat to the finals twice. I still don't think they're retiring his jersey, man. The fan bases probably won't like them for a very long time. I think fans sort of see it as a marriage. They value loyalty, they value commitment. They want to see their guy out there losing on the court. Preferably they want to see them winning, but they want to see a guy who's there thick and thin. I mean, that's why Steph is so beloved in Golden State, right? Because he's stuck around through some very bad seasons. Steph doesn't have that reflex to just pull the ripcord when things get bad. If the Warriors are bad, he's on a bad Warriors team, and that's just the way it is. That's how he's decided to guide his career. And honestly, I can't even decide if it's good or if it's bad. I think it's just a matter of preference of how you do your thing. Okay, thank you for being here. Like the video if you enjoyed it. The likes are really helping. Let me know about the sound. I just moved and it's kind of echoing here. If it really sucks, I'll try to do something about it. But give me a suggestion of what video you'd like to see. I think this was a suggestion. I can't remember. Be good to your mothers. Eat a corn dog.